So welcome everybody. I'm joined with Jerom. He wrote this amazing book, How to Stop Being Broke, and it's your choice. And so I'm going to deep dive into asking him a bunch of questions and his motivation and how he's helping people. He's a partner at KKOS Lawyers, and I interact with him with clients, and he provides amazing advice. And this book is just chock full of great stuff. I wrote on probably every page and tagged pages, and I don't read books. I like to study them. And so this is definitely a book to get to study. Jerom, I'd like to have you introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about you and your book and your motivation. I'm going to ask you some more questions throughout the process.
Yeah, thanks, David. I'm really excited to be here, excited to be able to speak with you about this topic. It's a topic that I like to talk about probably a little bit too much. I get excited. My eyes get really big when I talk about it. I am, just my background, I'm an attorney, a tax attorney at KKOS Lawyers, a partner here at the law firm, been here for about 13 years, live in Cedar City, Utah. I'm married. I've got 3 kids, 15, 9, and 7. My motivation for writing it is that I lived it, right? I was 41 years old, been here at the law firm for, about 8 years at that point, was making pretty good money, but wasn't making any headway in building wealth, in getting out of debt. My finances did not look as good as they should have. And so I went through a process of completely changing the way I interact with money, the way I think about my finances. And it changed my life, and it did it in a really quick way. And a lot of it is Dave Ramsey is out there, and I love Dave, but I think Dave will only get us so far or so fast. I used Dave and his methods as a springboard to build and protect wealth, and felt like I had something to say about the topics, was inspired to write the book.
Yeah, and you did a great job. I know you put a lot of work into it, and I've written a couple books, and I know how hard that is to write the books. Oh man, a lot of edits, late nights and stuff. Right. Yeah. You got a story, the $221,000 in 31 months. Wow, that's amazing. So many people struggle with this issue. I'm curious, in that 31 months, like, is that something that you set out to accomplish, or was that a date range? Like, how the 31, did you think that you're going to do it in 15 months or 50 months, or just curious?
Yeah. So at the beginning, right, when I finally had this come to Jesus moment, for lack of a better term, about I need to pay attention to my finances, I looked at my student loan debt, right? I had student loan debt from undergraduate degree and from law school. I hadn't looked at those balances for years, for decades. I had no idea how much I owed. So that was a choice, right? The name of the book is Stop Choosing to Be Broke. One of the choices I had to make was to confront, where am I? Instead of just feeling my way around and blind leading the blind, I needed to take control and pay attention to where I was. So I looked at the amount that I owed on my student loans. My wife has her master's in social work, so she has student loans from her graduate school. For the first time, I looked at those things in a really long time and added it all up, and I had $221,000 of non-mortgage debt, right? This didn't even include what I owed on my house. And that number hit me in the face, but then I said, okay, how long is this going to take? And I did some math, and I expected it to take us about 4.5 to 5 years. That's what I thought it was going to take to do this. But as we got going, and as me and my wife worked together as a team and started paying attention to where our money was going, what we were spending money on, made conscious decisions about what not to spend money on and how to attack our debt, we ended up now, and things started going well here at work. KKOS Lawyers is growing, and I started making a little bit more money too. That was absolutely part of it. But it did snowball, and 31 months just ended up being how long it took. My goal, really, when I thought it was going to be 4.5 to 5 years, was, okay, let's get it done in 4. We ended up getting it done in a little bit more than 2.5 because of the momentum we created.
And so when you just came up with this plan. Obviously, you talked with your wife, and that seemed like a good idea to her too. I'm assuming she was on board. Did you have other support? Did you have other people in your life to help you? Did you talk about it? Or was it just between you and her?
It was, I talked about it probably too much. I wanted people to know. I got excited about it and I started thinking, why doesn't everybody do it this way? Why did I wait so long? So I did. I told just about everybody that I came in contact with, people that probably didn't care and didn't want to know. I had conversations about this is what I'm doing. So the biggest support, honestly, was me and my wife had to be on the same page. And for the most part, we're never 100%. You're never 100%, but we both had this goal. But support from my wife's family. My wife's family lives this way. My family, my parents, my siblings, they're great people. They thought we were nuts for what we were doing. Not bad, but they were like, you really want to do that? My parents are great. They're both spenders. I was a spender. My dad's made a fair amount of money. And so it wasn't like we didn't talk a lot about money, but my parents didn't live this way. So it's not that I didn't get support from my parents. They were just like, good luck. It sounds cool, but gosh, I wouldn't do that. So it was a lot of support from my wife's family, from people here, my church community here in Cedar City, Utah, people here at work. They made fun of me for watching Dave Ramsey videos, spending too much time doing that sort of thing, but they were a great help as well.
Yeah, that's important, right? Getting people involved, making that public proclamation. People also talk about like dream boards and stuff and cork boards and posting things. Was that part of your success?
I think those things can be really powerful. I didn't do anything like that. The two keys, I know there's more than this, but two big things that I started doing, right? People will ask, what's the first thing I have to do? What's the first thing I have to pay? Or I'll ask people, what's the first thing you have to pay if you want to get out of debt and you want to build wealth? What's the first thing you have to pay? And the answer is freaking attention. Pay freaking attention to your money and where it goes. I spent 20 years of my adult life not paying any freaking attention to what I was spending my money on, where it went, right? As long as I wasn't overdrawn at the end of the month, cool. I thought I was in a good spot. So number one is you've got to pay freaking attention to your finances. If you don't, that's the first choice. Pay attention. Then the second really big key for me, the visual board that I had never done before in my life, and I thought it was for nerds and geeks and morons, frankly, was doing an actual budget, right? Every month, where does my money go? What is important to me? What am I going to spend it on first? And what am I going to say no to? Because that is a magic word in this process, is the word no. For 31 months, we said no to stuff. We said no to vacations. We said no to buying a new car. We said no, usually, to eating out. For a minute, you're going to have to say no. And that word is powerful. And you get used to it and you get to the point where you love it. But the visual representation was how much money is actually coming in this month and listing what are my priorities financially? What am I going to spend money on first, second, and how much is going to go to each of these things was incredibly powerful for me because I had never done it. I was 41 years old. I had never done a budget in my entire life. And so unlocking that power was huge.
And it doesn't, from your book and what you just said, your parents, they had good money, they spent, they're not savers. So this wasn't taught to you.
Right.
Dave Ramsey, he's teaching it. That's good. But you got to go out and see it. You got to go and really want it. You wanted it and you accomplished that. You conquered it.
Right.
Just like with all the other things in life, passing the bar exam and all these successes that you have, it takes work.
Yes.
So good job.
I appreciate that. Yeah. And it is. And it's just constant, sustained effort. Another thing that Dave Ramsey talks about and that I agree with is when you've got that debt. I had a $221,000 debt chasing me. And he talks about being gazelle intense, which is, all right, run away from your debt, work hard at it, run away from it like a gazelle running away from a cheetah, right? That debt it's chasing you. And if you don't work at it, you don't run, you don't keep that sustained effort, then the cheetah is going to get you, right? That debt is going to take you over and you're never going to be able to defeat it. And I love that metaphor, but I think it will only take you so far and will only move you so fast, because who else is pretty motivated in that exchange with the cheetah and the gazelle is the cheetah. The cheetah's got to eat the gazelle to live, to have food, right? To survive. So the cheetah is running towards something. So I want the folks that read my book, I want them to be gazelle intense, run away from that debt like a gazelle, but you've got to be cheetah intense too. Why does it matter that you get out of debt? Why does it matter to build wealth? What is your goal? Maybe it's, hey, I want to be able to travel the world, or I want to when I retire, I want to be able to retire comfortably, and I want a cabin in such and such location. I want to be able to help my kids go to college. What you're running towards like a cheetah is just as important, if not more important, than running away from the bad debt like a gazelle runs away from a cheetah. That makes sense?
Absolutely. Yeah, definitely. Run towards and from. You got to have that balance. Absolutely. Right. Yeah. And so that's smart.
If the goal is just to get out of debt, you're not going to go that far. But if it's to get out of debt so that I can save money to buy a house or build a business without that debt dragging me down, okay, now that motivation is that much stronger.
So spending and being broke, and the name of your title for the book, Stop Choosing to Be Broke. So it's a choice, and you talk a lot about the choice in the book, but I'd love to ask or have you talk more right now about those choices and what holds people back.
Yeah. I think what holds people back to a certain extent, number one, is what held, I think, primarily me back for so long was I don't really know what I'm doing. My money just happens to me. So number one choice is to not pay attention to what's going on with your finances. So that's a choice. Other choices people make are to sacrifice long-term stability, long-term wealth building for something that feels good now. And I want to make sure I say this doesn't come from a place of I'm right and you're wrong, audience. I did these things. I did it wrong forever, right? I chose to go out to eat all the time. And that made me broke and overweight, right? Because it was not good for me physically and not good for me financially, but it was easy in the moment because I didn't plan. I got to go grab something to eat. So I ate out so often. And that choice keeps us broke. I want this brand new car right now. And I'm willing to go into debt at maybe 10, 15% interest on a depreciating asset to have this car that I think is really cool right now, instead of I'm gonna take a lesser car and save up and get out of debt, and then I'm gonna start paying cash for my cars, or at least financing much more responsibly than many people do. So those sorts of choices, and I think a huge choice, right? When you do those things, when you use credit cards, when you use debt to buy consumer items, and I'm not doing this to shame anybody, but think about what you're doing, right? When you get that credit card statement with all of your purchases for the month, you're always looking backwards. You're always looking back at things you already bought, experiences you already had, and you're paying for those things in the past constantly with interest. When you choose not to be broke, you choose to focus on the future because you're saving with interest. The interest is working for you towards what you're going to do next, that vacation that you're going to take, that vehicle that you're going to buy with cash, that home remodel that you're going to do with cash. You focus on the future, and that focusing on the future is a key to helping you to stop being broke.
And it's control too, so that you feel more in control. You don't feel out of control. Who doesn't want to feel like they're in
Right.
control. But with all that debt, you're like, oh, I'll pay for it later. Yet all that interest is just going to catch up. And then we actually are going to lose control because we're overspending, we're overeating, we're over consuming versus taking inventory of what you're saying. So we're actually going to have more control, and our future self's going to thank us. And so,
Absolutely. Absolutely. And it is only for a short, relatively short, right, amount of time that you're making these major sacrifices, right? For that 31 months, we didn't do stuff that a lot of people do, but it was for a short amount of time, but I was controlling it. I made those decisions so that now I have control over my finances. And if I want to go buy a car, I can go pay for it in cash. I don't have to worry about what are the interest rates. Rising interest rates are my friend, right? I've got money in savings accounts. And so when the interest rates go up, that's a good thing for me because I don't have any debt. So that control, right? I don't have to worry about, well, what's the Fed going to do? I don't have to worry about, is the Supreme Court going to uphold this student loan forgiveness? I don't care. I don't have any student loans, right? So I have taken that part of that financial part of my life out of anybody else's hands. Credit card companies, banks, the federal government, let them do what they want. Now, to a certain extent, those things affect me, but not in the way they do when I have or I rely on debt to get the things that I want from a consumer standpoint.
so you had this epiphany when you're 41.
41.
Do you think you could have done it when you're 31 or 21? Obviously, you're going to school and all that stuff, but did you have to go through this situation to get to this point? Or if you were to go back 20 years to your younger self, would your younger self have listened?
That is actually a really good question, David. I've done a few of these interviews and I've never been asked that question. I think it's a really interesting one. And I think for me, so I want to say this for you, listening audience, yes, regardless of your age, you can do it. If you're watching this and listening to me here is sparking anything in you where you go, gosh, I would like to have that control. If you're 21, 25, 31, absolutely you can do it. Could I have done it at 31? I don't know. I don't know if I would have listened. So Dave Ramsey was the impetus to get me there a little bit, right? Just his program and the way he talks about money is to a certain extent. And I think there are plenty of places where Dave gets it somewhat wrong, but it was inspiring to me. But for years, I would watch Dave Ramsey videos every once in a while, watch his show every once in a while for probably at least 10 years off and on before I actually started doing this. And I didn't make changes in my life because I thought I didn't have the control, right? I didn't have any credit card debt, which I thought that's the really evil debt is credit card debt. So I'm good. I don't have credit card debt. All I have is student loan debt. And that's so big, I can't do anything about it anyway. I'm going to be paying on that for 25 years. I don't have any control over that. It is what it is. BS, man. It's not, right? Once I took the bull by the horns, I got rid of it in 2.5 years because the thought of paying student loans until I was 55 was absolutely untenable. There was no way. When I really grabbed hold of how long I was going to pay student loans for, there was no way I was going to do it. But it took me, I think it took this for me. For some of us, we're just hard-headed, and you might not be in a position where you can do it. But if you allow yourself to make better choices, you can. But for me, at 21, I was too dumb. I don't think I'd have done it. I don't think I would have.
It's tuition's not getting any cheaper.
No.
It seems like it's just going up and up. So yeah, people graduating with even more debt,
right,
and taking longer to pay
right.
off.
And that is a mindset that's out there too, that, well, an education is worth it no matter what it costs. I don't know if I buy that. An education is absolutely important, but it's not worth it no matter what it costs, right? If you go into $300,000 worth of debt for a degree that gets you a $50,000 a year job, that's a really crappy return on investment. And so this thought that just go into whatever student loan debt you have to because it will be worth it later I just don't think is true. There are guideposts, and I talk about this in my book. How much debt can I go into for my undergrad? For me, none, right? I think there are ways to get your undergrad at the state, your local state college, right? In-state tuition, working a little bit, saving up, where you can get through that without debt. Now, graduate degrees, oftentimes that's going to require debt. And oftentimes the return on investment there is great, but not always. There are guideposts, again, that I talk about, rules of thumb in my book about the amount of debt that makes sense if you're going to get a college degree, because it's not, well, whatever it costs. That is not choosing the right path. That's not choosing not to be broke, to use a double negative.
With education, and one of my favorite quotes about is from Einstein, don't let your schooling get in the way of your education. And sometimes I'm constantly actually running into people who maybe are being downsized because of various reasons. Maybe they're burned out too. Maybe they just want a career change and they need to go retool and do something different now. And so it's going to cost money to go retool. And education is important, but so is learning. And so can we educate ourselves and learn without having such a high price tag? And that's a philosophical question. Yeah. And you got to really choose your career path, but
right.
Like finance it, make sure, and there's rules of thumb. And I don't remember, do you address some of those rules of thumbs about education and schooling in your book?
Yeah, I do. I do talk about in there that I think your goal should be to get your undergrad. And I didn't follow this. I didn't have very much undergrad debt, but I had some without debt. I think you can absolutely make your way to a bachelor's degree by making smart choices and sacrificing without any debt. When it comes to graduate degrees, my rule of thumb is that you need to research. All right, if I graduate, let's just take law school, for example. You can find out from your law schools that you're thinking about going to, or graduate schools of any sort, what is the average starting salary for somebody that graduates with the law degree or the master's in whatever from this school? What is the average starting salary? Maybe it's $80,000. Maybe it's $150,000, whatever it is. I would suggest not going into any more debt for your graduate degree than the average starting salary for somebody that comes out of that school with that degree. Because it'll be different, right? Oh, I'm going to be a lawyer and I'm going to come out of school and make $300,000 a year. Maybe if you graduated from Yale, but not if you graduated from University of Denver, where I went, or where most people go to law school. So it matters the school that you're going to and the degree that you're getting. And so the rule of thumb is don't take more debt than the average starting salary for somebody that comes out of that school with that degree.
There's a lot of people that need that advice, and hopefully they'll follow it and think through it and just get that data so that they can make smart choices.
And if your school won't give you that data, if you can't seem to find it and nobody will give it to you, that's a red flag. They should give you that data. They should have it on a silver platter for you, because that's your return on investment. What am I going to make?
Definitely. And so that's so important, right? Offense, defense, what you're going to make, got to figure out how much you're going to make versus how much it's going to cost to get there, and do that type of analysis. I want to get back to the name of the book. Again, names, titles are intriguing. I'm assuming that you had a list of different titles and names when you're choosing this book, and you went with this one, which is a great title. But some of the other titles just that didn't make the cut, just curious, that were intriguing.
Yeah.
Do you have any stories about that?
So the only other title I thought really hard about was "You Make Too Much Darn," and I didn't use the word darn. "You make too much darn money to be this broke." That was another one, right? Because that's what I felt. I was at 41. I was making good money as an attorney. I was six figures, well into six figures, and I was still broke, still had $221,000 in debt and a negative net worth. And so that was another one, is you make too much darn money to be this broke. But I thought, I don't know how well that will play. It's a long name. So I went with "Stop Choosing to Be Broke" instead.
As you talk to wealthy individuals, and they probably confide in you that they probably have more debt.
Yeah.
And I know for me, I'm like, what? As I look at financials, I'm like, why would you get into that situation?
Yeah.
But again, it's that choice. And I'm sure that you have lots of stories about that. And so, is there much like pushback on, oh, that won't work for me, that worked for you, even though that they're wealthy, they're apparently doing well?
There is. There can be pushback. I think most wealthy people are not, if they truly are wealthy, they're not in a lot of consumer debt, right? I don't talk to many wealthy people that have consumer credit card debt. I will talk to wealthy people who have very low interest car debt, and their mathematical equation, and I get it, is that 80 grand that I could have put in cash for this vehicle, I'm financing at 3% or 2% or something really low. And I make 8% or whatever it is in the market. So I'm making the spread. And so that can work. But people do give me pushback that I don't need to be out of debt. I'm balancing everything okay. I'm easily able to make my debt payments. And for a long time, that can be true. But when it's like Warren Buffett says, right? When the tide goes out, you can tell who's not wearing any pants. When things get tough, you don't want to have that debt. You don't want to be obligated to make payments when maybe the income isn't coming in, when maybe the investments aren't doing as well. So I think there is a lot of freedom. And that's what this is about to a great extent, is feeling financially free. And the freedom that I have, right? The only debt payment, I haven't paid off my home yet, but I have no other debt, is that when all heck breaks loose, I've got a 3 to 6 month emergency fund. I don't owe anybody anything except for the payment on my house. And luckily I bought my house when houses were not nearly as expensive as they are now. So it's not a big house payment. That freedom, that control is amazing. And that's what I try to get people to realize, is living debt free gives you an incredible amount of freedom and peace when it comes to your finances. I don't wake up in the middle of the night in a cold sweat about my finances, because I just don't have very many obligations. I don't owe people money, and I choose not to. I bought a vehicle earlier this year. For the first time in my life, I paid cash. And like, the dealership doesn't know what to do with you when you do that. And it's fun where they go, we pulled your credit report. I've never seen one with so little on it. Thank you. I enjoy that.
It actually takes longer to buy a vehicle in cash than it is with credit, because that's how their
It
systems all set
it
up
does.
that way.
Full disclosure, I ended up financing it and then paying it off immediately. But to just get through the process, I did take a loan and then paid it off immediately.
I was too stubborn. I'm like, I've got the cash. I'm going to pay cash. And like, they had to verify that. It took way longer. They're like, you could have saved 2 hours. I'm like, next time I'll just do that. Get it for 1 month and this.
Yep,
No.
that's what I did.
But debt, this is such a big topic. There's so many people. I interact with people in their 70s, and they're just like, they haven't saved enough for retirement. They have lived a good lifestyle. They've lived a good life. Everybody wants to live the good life. But when it comes to, well, I can't work this hard for this long anymore, I don't have enough savings. And they have a lot of consumer debt, and they have a lot of business debt. And they're telling me, I wish I would have known this stuff 40 years ago. And that's why we're here, is let's try to educate.
Right.
Now, will people listen? Will they change? Maybe. Right. I don't know. Something maybe that we say will help. But it's so important. So some other practical, I'd love to get more practical tips of how to do that. The mind shift change, because it's about mind shift. It's about the heart shift also.
And it is, right. There are steps to get there. And there are different financial folks, advisors out there that have different steps. I am drawn to the Ramsey baby steps. Again, I want to make sure I say this, right? I don't follow Dave lockstep, but there's so much that he talks about that I think makes a lot of sense. And these steps are part of it, right? Step one is have what Ramsey calls a baby emergency fund. And this is a place where I differ from Dave, right? Dave Ramsey talks about $1,000 emergency fund. That made a lot of sense maybe in 1992 2, which is when he introduced these baby steps, and he's never changed that $1,000, right? $1,000 is in 1992 dollars, I think is like $3,000 now. So, right, an emergency fund that life happens, you've got that in the bank and you don't touch it, whether it's $1,000 or $2,000, or a really good rule of thumb I like is a month worth of your expenses, right? What goes out in a month, have that set aside. That's step 1. Then step 2, after you've got that, is take all budget every month, and what you've got left at the end of the month, you throw at your debt. You throw at usually the smallest debt. That's the debt snowball, smallest to largest. You list your debts and attack the smallest one first, pay that one off, take everything you were paying on that one, go to the next one. There's also the debt avalanche, which is, all right, I'm not going to list my debts from smallest to largest. I'm going to list them from highest interest rate to lowest interest rate. That math is better. It absolutely is better. I pay off the high interest debt first. There is a psychological component of turning around and high-fiving your significant other when you pay off a debt in the debt snowball that can sometimes not happen in the debt avalanche, and you get frustrated and end up not doing it. But pay off all of your non-mortgage debt. That's step 2. Step 3, save an emergency fund, a real emergency fund of 3 to 6 months of expenses, and put that in place. Then steps 4, 5, and 6, you do at the same time. Save 15% for retirement, save for your kids' education, and pay off your home. And Dave wants you to pay off your home as soon as possible. I love that. I think that's a great goal. But if you can have a paid off home by the time you retire, I think you've done it. And then step 7 is just live life, right? Be generous and build wealth. And that's where I think Dave, it doesn't drop the ball so much, but I think there can be so much more to building wealth, getting into real estate investments, getting into things maybe outside of retirement accounts. There are creative things that you can do, things that make a lot of sense in that area that Dave doesn't really talk about.
So what about the home loan and you have a 2.5% mortgage?
Yeah. So
that's tough.
It is tough, right? Because the math says, well, keep your mortgage at 2.5% and go invest and get 5 or 8 or whatever it is, right? You don't have to do really that well to beat your 2.5% mortgage. The problem, and it's not a problem. I don't get mad at people for doing that. My parents do that. My parents are approaching retirement, still have a mortgage. It's at a very low interest rate, and they invest the difference. I wouldn't choose to do that because I want the peace of having a paid for home, of knowing I don't owe anybody anything. The other thing is when you pay off a debt, whether it's a mortgage or something else, your rate of return is guaranteed, right? I know what my rate of return is. It's the interest I'm not going to pay going forward when I pay this off early. I have a guaranteed return. When I invest, now right now you can invest in a savings account and do better than the 2.5%. So that's guaranteed. But some people will go for bigger returns and make riskier investments, right? There's risk there. What you invest in may go down in value. So you ended up losing money. So you take risk out of the equation when you pay off a debt. So the peace, the lack of risk, those are things that are attractive to me. So right now, to be honest, to tell you about my situation, I'm not paying off my mortgage quickly, but that's because I'm saving money to add on to my home without using any debt. I'm not going to borrow money to do an addition to my home. So that money that I would put towards paying off my debt quicker, my mortgage debt, I'm actually just saving it with interest to make a home addition without taking a loan.
Nice. Yeah, that's smart. Don't take on more debt, especially interest rates now.
Right.
Yeah.
And there are debts that can be, people will borrow money to buy rental properties, for example, to invest in real estate. That debt can be helpful. I just don't want people to get over leveraged. I think it's a bad idea to take a HELOC, which is borrowing money, right? A home equity line of credit. I'm going to take a home equity line of credit borrow money against my home, and I'm going to use that as a down payment to go get another mortgage to buy a rental property. So now I've got a rental property that's 100% leveraged. Everything that went into it was borrowed. And if tenants don't pay, or I can't rent it out, or the market crashes, I'm the guy that wasn't wearing any pants when the tide went out. I don't want to be that guy. I think there are responsible ways to use leverage for real estate and other investments, which puts me at odds with Dave Ramsey. Dave would never say to borrow money in that circumstance. He wants you to pay cash for everything. My rule of thumb there is to be twice as careful as the bank. The bank wants you to put 20% down. I say put 40% down. Now I feel like that is a happy medium between over leveraging, borrowing 100% and paying 100%.
That makes sense. Since I'm a tax nerd, I got to geek out about
Yeah.
something that you said, because it's like when people borrow money from their HELOC and they go buy a rental property, but they don't do a 10T election. And then you can't, like, if you get audited, the IRS will be like, where's that 10T election? And all that interest that you thought you could write off is gone because you didn't make that election. So I've seen that several times recently. New clients, I'm like, where's this? And I'm like, I don't know. So they go back and amend the tax returns to put that 10T on there.
Yeah.
And so that they just double check and guarding themselves against any issues. But anyways, so you're saying be really careful. Maybe don't do that. Borrow against your home equity.
Yeah.
But
I'm not a fan of it. I want to say this. It can absolutely work. Are there people that do well doing that and have grown their assets and grown their wealth doing that? Yes. Are there also people that lost their home because they did that? Yes. And so I don't think, right, I want you to, and I say this in the book, I want people to build wealth while maintaining financial peace. I don't find a lot of peace in 100% leveraging property after property, which you can do. And if you time it, you can win. But if you don't, you won't. And it can end up ugly. I don't find any peace in that. It is a way to build wealth, but it's a way to build wealth that can backfire and doesn't produce any peace in the meantime. At least not for me. I couldn't handle it.
Yeah. Especially as with married and having a family, there's a lot that is riding on you and your family and your choices.
Right.
If you're single, maybe you had some more in time horizon. If the spidey senses are going off, it's too leveraged, it's too risky. Do you really want that risk, or can you lose that? What would happen? And really think through that, because if somebody's saying on the internet, you could do all this and look at all these case studies and examples and it's easy, follow my system. Yeah. But then they're asking you to take all this money out of your house and to leverage your house. Yeah. Just be careful. Yeah. Have a double check and just spend some time and listen to this podcast.
When I love what you said, the spidey sense is going off. Pay attention to how you feel, right, in your gut when a promoter or somebody is saying those things, where you go, is that right? Because if it was, why wouldn't literally everyone do it? It's because it doesn't always work. And so just pay attention to your gut and how you feel when somebody is presenting you with something like that. And people that present those sort of things are not necessarily bad people. They're not scammers.
No.
They're glossing over the risk part of it. They're ignoring it. And maybe because they've never been bitten by it, but at some point, it usually happens to a certain extent. So you can use debt responsibly. Debt can absolutely be a wealth building tool when it's used responsibly to purchase income producing assets. It's not a wealth building tool when it's used to purchase something that you're going to ingest, right? A meal, right? Or a vacation. Those things don't build wealth. So don't use debt to purchase them.
So quotes, you have a lot of quotes in your book. Are there certain quotes that you say on a regular basis that your family is rolling their eyes every time you say it, that it's a part of your DNA, it's a part of your life? You have a lot of great quotes, and I spent a whole hour just talking about a lot of your great quotes in here, but are there certain things that come to your mind that...
Yeah, I've talked about a few of them, right? What's the first thing you have to pay if you want to get out of debt? Freaking attention is one of them. I say that to people all the time. One of them, my kids, you talk about rolling eyes. When we started doing this, when we got into this, my oldest was 12. Yeah. Anyway, she was 12, and then my other two, I think, were 6 and 4. And we started living in a different way. We started not doing stuff that we used to do. And I bought some of Dave Ramsey's kids' books. And there was a quote in there, right? A kid wanted to buy something. He went to his parents, and the dad said, "I'm sorry, it's just not in the budget, bud." I started saying that to my kids every time they would ask for something. I go, "Oh, I'm sorry, it's just not in the budget, bud." And they got so sick of me saying that. But my kids, I'm just excited. My oldest is 15 now. Yeah, I think she would have been. Anyway, she's 15 now. I think she was actually young. She was 10 when we started. Sorry. So now she's 15. I'm like, that math doesn't work. She's 15 now, but she's got these tools financially and this background that I didn't have, right? My parents were like, "I guess you got to borrow to go to school." My parents were like, "Oh, I guess you got to use your credit card to live while you're in school," because they were doing okay, but right, couldn't completely support me. And I was going to law school. I didn't have a job. "I guess you got to do these things." My kids, right? I'm changing the generations going forward. My kids have tools that I didn't have. My kids understand the dangers of debt. They understand not to get into credit cards. They understand not to borrow money to buy a car, those sorts of things. And we're going to get them in a position to invest and let that magic of compound interest, right? If you can start investing responsibly in your teens and 20s, you don't have to invest that much to have an unbelievable amount of money when it comes time to retire. That's what I'm excited to see is, all right, my kids are going to get 50 years of this before they retire when I got 20, 25. What can they do that I wasn't able to do because I just was dumb for 20 years of my adult life?
Yeah, that's a great story. You said a lot of great things in that short moment. I was just thinking about, did the kids come up with a t-shirt or buttons or something that says "not in the budget, bud," or anything? Like, did you guys have some fun with that?
They just started saying it all. They would say it to each other. "Oh, I wish we could go to get something to eat." "Oh, it's just not in the budget." But no, they should. I love that idea. I'm going to probably make them t-shirts for Christmas now that say it's just not in the budget. But I love that. Love it.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, this has been a great chat and episode. And so for people to get a hold of you for more information, for KKOS lawyers, like, what's the best way to get a hold?
For my day job as a tax attorney, we do asset protection, estate planning. KKOSlawyers.com, or just Google KKOS lawyers. You can get a hold of me that way. My information is there. My book is available on Amazon. Again, it's Stop Choosing to Be Broke, A User's Guide to Money. I'm getting into, I love this. I'm hoping to start maybe a podcast of my own. I'm putting together a YouTube channel with some videos that people can get into, but I don't have those ready to go yet. But it'll all be under that sort of Stop Choosing to Be Broke umbrella. I'm a trademark attorney as well, so looking to get that trademarked for myself.
That's smart. That's really good. Yeah. So thank you for your time. This has been great. So appreciate it.
Thanks, David.